Jon Bennett. I am, amongst other things, a qualified mine surveyor, and a little while ago I carried out a study for the Camborne School of Mines of artisanal and small-scale mining. This is a subject for which I have a continuing interest, as it's an area of huge significance in many parts of the world, but may have little visibility in countries such as the UK. It seems a good topic for a short presentation to contribute to the online offering of the Bath Royal Literary and Scientific Institution, the BRLSI. I should quickly say that the description is traditionally artisanal and small-scale mining, but partly for elegance and partly as the phrase small-scale mining has recently taken on a new high-technology implication for short-term exploitation of smaller deposits. I shortened the title of the talk, but the subject will be Artisanal and Small-Scale Mining, or ASM, as it is generally known. So we'll have a bit of an introduction, then look at artisanal mining for gold, small and medium-scale gold mining, then gemstone mining, a quick look at critical metals, which is a growing area, and then some thoughts about some initiatives relating to the sector before we finish. As a definition then, taking it from the International Council on Mining and Metals, it is understood generally to refer to mining activities that are labour intensive, but they are capital, mechanisation and technology poor. So there was a report by the World Bank, or made by consultants for the World Bank in 2019, last year, where the latest estimate is that around 40 million men, women and children are directly engaged in mining of this nature, with millions more, probably 100 million or so, dependent. These are very generalized numbers. It's impossible to know, and it changes all the time. More than 50 countries, such activities, mainly gold or gemstones, some industrial minerals, and there is, in certain areas where they exist as ores, some significant growth in what we call now critical metals, with the changes in modern technology. Something like 30% women are actually involved in the mining, and then a lot of children, as defined as 5 to 17 years. This report by the International Labour Organization, the ILO, was done in 2005 when they estimated 1 million. It's undoubtedly more than that now, but people are still constantly quoting that and saying, well, it must have gone up since then. I'll look again at children towards the end of the presentation. The number of people in different areas then, and I was quite surprised to see that South and Central America were not amongst the highest, because that's traditionally a very great area for small-scale gold mining. South Asia is obviously standing out there, but Sub-Saharan Africa that's where I have particularly looked, but there's a lot there in East Asia and Pacific, and a few people in, I suppose, Central Asia, probably the Stans, rather than Europe. Not a lot in Europe. And this can have a negative outlook, particularly with the impacts on the environment, and there's no doubt about it that it can have negative environmental impacts. In fact, there are areas such as the Madre de Dios region in South America where pictures come back of dreadful impacts by a great influx of small-scale gold miners, or looking for gold, a gold rush as it were. Having said that, some of the environmental impacts by government-sponsored companies in South America also having probably a greater environmental impact, but that's another story. But as you can see, in Ghana they went so far as to ban this form of mining in 2017 and send the police in. However, although it is obviously a complex business to make it viable, this is a sector that has a huge impact on poverty. So then the issues are, in general, the environment, land degradation, siltation of rivers, deforestation, and impact of particularly mercury, and I'll talk a lot about that. Then there are safety and health issues, and wherever there's rock being crushed and broken, there is likelihood of silica with impacts on the lungs, ground stability, and some of these people go into underground workings that a qualified mining engineer would not go near without a lot of work on stabilizing the roof and so forth. Confined spaces where carbon dioxide can build up and people cannot come out from, and toxins, not only mercury, some are using cyanide, and some areas about markets and price. The gold price is a fickle friend, where you get migrants, which you do a lot in this sector. You do tend to get conflict, or at least tensions, and there are areas where it actually this sort of mining does put finance into revolutions and war, and the general living conditions of people, but it does nevertheless give a living for millions of people who would not otherwise have one. So let's have a look at some pictures then, and the kind permission of Dr. Tadesa in Tanzania. I have a couple of pictures of Tanzanian development. Now this will undoubtedly be a fairly well ordered mine site, with people given proper government permissions to work their patch, and the fact that he was there says that. And you can see that people are gradually developing along what they call a quartz reef in that part of the world, where there is gold present, and people are gradually putting in their different shafts. And a couple more pictures close up of where the timbering is going on, and a manual winder there being put together over a shaft, with quite a bit of advice being given by the looks of it. But that's Tanzania, and I've had some contacts there, but where I've actually visited is Mozambique. Now in Mozambique, the gold mine sites are in the Odzimutare Manica Greenstone Belt. Greenstone Belt is classically a sort of area where you find gold. Some of the great gold rushes of history have taken place in Greenstone Belts, Kalgoorlie and so forth. And this particular one runs from east Zimbabwe into west Mozambique, and there are a lot of little artisanal and gold, small-scale gold miners working along this area. Now, when I was there, they were just those sort of miners, but I have noticed that there is a project financed from the London-listed AIM exchange for a larger gold project of open pit mining. Money raised, some Chinese input, I think. And it's interesting this, because they will use large-scale mining prospecting will use the presence and the history of artisanal and small-scale mining as one of their indicators that they're looking for before they start spending money on boreholes for core samples and so forth. So it's not perhaps surprising that they've turned up. So I visited, first of all, a mining village, a mine camp, if you like, at Tsetsera. This is right on the border between Mozambique and Zimbabwe, on the Mozambican side. A nice little village, these little houses, people living there. There's a very friendly family here, demonstrating his little mill that he will use for grinding ore. We'll see that again in a second. And quite a number of houses. People have settled there. Didn't actually see the extraction there, which is part of the reason why I put that Tanzanian scene up. But I've spent some time looking at the way they process their ore. So they get the rock down from the mine, and they start by what in mining terms is called comminution, or crushing, reducing it as far as you can to the smallest size of rock particles, So he's got sort of a pestle and mortar system there, typical use, some sort of heavy metal object he's got hold of, and some things he uses for crushing in. So he will be there for quite some time, crushing away before passing it on to the little mills, hand-driven mills that they use for grinding it further. Note the blue plastic bowls, which are ubiquitous on this site. Whoever's providing them is probably doing very well. And here we have the mills, little ball or rod mills, perhaps bits of iron bar put in there, together with the broken rock from the last process we saw, and that they'll turn these for perhaps a couple of hours, and they may even be adding some mercury at this stage. We'll look at that in a moment. And it'll grind it right down to a fairly small size of rock particle. This is just something I saw in another place in the area, a demonstration just to show you that some of these are a little bit more robustly made. This is obviously done with a bit of welded angle iron there and an old gas cylinder or something, and so that's very good if you've got a fairly permanent site. This was in Chimoio, a nearby town. Incidentally, most of these guys looking on are in fact small-scale miners from other parts of the world that had gathered for this demonstration and a bit of a conference there. But thinking about that, though, if you're actually a mobile miner, sort of moving from site to site, it's pretty difficult to lug this sort of kit around. So those little wooden ones are maybe something that you can put together when you get there. Right, so we've now broken it right down. It looks very fine, this rock. So how are we going to separate the gold out from this broken rock? Well, I've taken this definition from a book I have from 1889, which was purchased by my great-great-uncle, who was a Cornish tin mine engineer, done his apprenticeship in the tin mines in Cornwall, and he was going out to the Kolar gold fields in India. So he obviously bought himself a book about gold mining, because there would be differences between tin and gold, particularly in the processing stage. And I put this up as the definition because it just shows you that this is not a new thing. This has been going on. These people have had mercury around long before they were born, generations using mercury. So amalgamation, mercury has the property of absorbing, it says there, or amalgamating with free gold with which it comes into sufficiently close contact. And this is where they do it at Cetera. They need water, so they have these blue plastic bowls. They have a kind of a heavy cloth material that they use, and they put their ore with plenty of mercury, and they're constantly adding mercury. It's cheap and it's very efficient. It's an efficient means of separating gold from host rock, and they'll work that in water. And here's a passing demonstration of child labour, if you like. The whole family gets involved, and he's just sort of rinsing it around, circulating it around, and he's got a bit of cloth in there. There's mercury and there's rock, and that's the first stage. And then this happy guy is doing the next stage of really sort of settling it down. It's a kind of panning operation, not quite as sophisticated a panning bowl as you do see in some places, elegant bowls, but it's the cloth and the sort of pushing it all together with your hands that work this, and you finally get a bit of amalgam appears. And here is a bit. Right, well, I was interested in this because I was wondering before I got there, are these people doing all right out of their efforts? Are there middlemen fleecing them, ripping them off, as it were? So that tiny little bit of amalgam, there's a lot of work gone into that, and one of the features of gold is that you have to move an awful lot of host rock in order to get a small amount of gold, which is one of the strange reasons when you think that gold has been so popular for so many centuries, but getting it is quite difficult. So a little piece of amalgam like that weigh about 2 grams, and you could buy it at the camp for 500 metikai. The metical is the currency of Mozambique. 500 metikai is worth about 18 American dollars. The atomic weights of gold and mercury are roughly the same, so you've got about a gram of gold there. So I was just thinking, well, at the time, what was the gold price? What are they getting in comparison with the international markets? Well, working it through the troy ounce, which is the curious measure of weight of gold, only used for gold, it works through that they got their about $18 worth of money for gold that on the international market, having become part of a much larger ingot or something, it would be worth about $30. So that didn't seem too bad, really, because you're out there. It's still a piece of amalgam in a remote part of Africa. It needs taking somewhere, proper refining, producing in a saleable form for the gold market. And they've got nearly 2/3 of the price. So these guys are not fools. They're not particularly being ripped off in that way. The fact is that they are living on something like $2 a day because the processes they have are so much more inefficient than a large-scale mine with all the big kit for processing. So let's think a little bit about mercury. We all know that it is a health risk. It's particularly a health risk as a vapor. So actually, they will tell you that what they were doing there with mercury on the skin is not as risky as if they were breathing it into their lungs, when such symptoms as these can appear, or probably will appear to some level. So you've got all sorts of mood impacts, neuromuscular changes, including atrophy, twitching. You've got changes in nerve responses, effects on cognitive function, and then at higher exposures it can attack the kidneys and respiratory system and result in death. So what do our miners usually do? Well, unfortunately, in many cases they burn it off. And this is a picture from somewhere around South or Central America. I don't know, I got it from Dr. Kevin Telmer of the Artisanal Gold Council. But there are pictures easily found on the internet. I'm very sensitive to copyright with any pictures by anybody else I'm using here. But you can easily find pictures of these miners with usually over a wood fire, so they're actually burning it off. That sometimes, particularly in South America, the amalgam will be sold to a merchant in what they call a gold shop in the village, who will then be burning it off in bulk, which will very often be exhausting out of the back of the gold shop into the village, which is obviously also not good. And there are quite considerable issues around all of this. This is called sponge gold, and it is the result of evaporating the mercury off on hot wood coals. It's got a lot of air in it. There's a bit of ash still mixed with it, but this is what they will have at the end, and they will sell on. Another thought about mercury, well, this is from a learned paper here about mercury in the environment, and it will, and as you can see, that in areas where these sorts of mines have been, you will see those pits that full of water that we saw pictures of, and they will have mercury that will be left behind, which will be forming inorganic salts, and that can move on into organic salts or organic complexes, such as methyl mercury. Now, when you get to that, it's extremely toxic, and then of course it's mobile in the water systems, can get out into the rivers and the sea, taken in by fish in particular. And there were some dramatic events in Japan, serious mercury poisoning in Japan. I think tuna fish has always been one of the pathways of food chains. So there's a great deal of concern about mercury in the environment, and our miners are not probably the main cause. Actually, they are a cause, but there are a lot of industrial processes that are churning out mercury into the environment. Within artisanal small-scale mining, this is a paper by Hilson and Pardee. Hilson is another of the writers on the subject, and he was looking in Ghana at the fact that the middlemen are really providing this mercury at low prices. It seems to be an inexhaustible supply. How that happens is difficult to know, but they also control the medicines for alleviating the poisoning, and Hilson calls it an agent of poverty. And his solutions were really what is cycle of dependency, breaking it down and trying to move to mercury-free technologies through education and support. Well, this is something that a lot of people have been doing a lot of work on. And indeed, since then, relatively recently, 2017, in Japan, at a place called Minamata, this global treaty was agreed, which is basically all countries have agreed to submit national action plans to reduce and control mercury release into the environment throughout its life cycle. And as I say, there are a lot of industrial stacks that are sending out mercury, and it's surprising, even coal-fired power stations, somehow or other there's mercury that comes out of some of them. Here are a few of the suggested methods of reducing the problem. Some of them still use mercury, such as the retort. That's a simple one, might have thought, an obvious solution, really, that you burn your mercury in the little container which has been buckled in, and then the cooling pipe will go down into water, and your mercury will then reform liquid from the vapor before it reaches the surface of the water, and it can be reused then. So one might have thought that would be very attractive. There are systems of fume hoods where we have these gold shops, or sort of communal mercury burning processes, where similar systems for regaining the mercury can be developed. The Filipino method is one of a number of methods really to try to make non-mercury approaches more efficient, and they will promote the borax flux, which is a purification process for the gold. However, this paper is actually in press at the moment. I think it's been accepted for publication, but it's a review paper by Vega and Fadina, and Vega is Marcelo Vega, I think, is somebody who's been working for many years, something like 40 years in the field, trying to encourage small-scale miners to use healthier processes, and all these things such as retorts, fume hoods, the borax process, physical separation, been promoted. But he's concluded in this paper, he thought he finally got to sort of put this into print, that all this work has not ended the use of mercury. He has a proposal, or they have, the authors, for large-scale mining to become more involved and to find a method, because they generally use cyanide leaching, very efficient also. In fact, small-scale miners sometimes use cyanide and sometimes use both. But as you can imagine, in an uncontrolled environment, that's another undesirable chemical substance. But by large-scale processing plants actually doing the processing for them as a kind of a quid pro quo agreement for them working nearby, and they will then pay back the profit. And that's his suggestion, which would be very good. I'd like to move on now. There was mention there of non-mercury methods, physical separation. This is a nice little mine I visited in Mozambique, the Crispin mine, where indeed they do that. This is Mr. Crispin, very nice guy who he left the area to seek his, I suppose, fortune and was very successful. Because the fact that on average people are getting $2 a day doesn't mean that a few people aren't striking it rich, because of course the history of gold is such. And he did okay. He came back with some money he'd saved, knowing about the old mine in the area that was unused and that he believed still had gold to be had. It did indeed, had a good yield. At this point, Mozambique had developed a much more orderly legal framework for granting licenses and so forth and monitoring what's going on in their mines. So the authorities insisted on a new access, which I'm sure he would have readily agreed to, seeing the old access there. And this is the portal, if you like, access point to the mine. He's now employing 90 people and supporting many more. And there's a lot of timber being used. It's not very competent rock that they're mining into here. And so they're putting in a lot of support. That's looking down to the portal. And as you can see, something that they have here that they didn't have at Tsetserra is electricity. There are electric cables dangling around all over the place, as they tend to often do on mine sites. There's an electric fan driving air into the mine, ventilating the mine through that large ventilation tube. As you can see, electrical gubbins, and you can also see that there's a pipe coming up from an electrically driven water pump that's bringing water out of the mine. So you go down, and well, you can see at the top there that the rock around the timber is not looking tremendously stable. So I think that the amount of timber is justified. Unfortunately, of course, it uses local timber. Going down, I think there are about 3 or 4 ladderways down, as I recall. I think they're probably about 60 meters down where they're working. We went down into the mine there, different ladderways. It's not a direct shaft. These are separate descents, which does make bringing it up basically a manual operation rather than a direct winder up. And there's the lowest level. One thing that struck me was, considering the amount of carpentry that goes on here, I thought they might have had better ladders. They just got nails banged in. But there's shift boss looking up, and you can see the water where we're down now at the lowest level where work is taking place, and they're pumping out. And then you go along a roadway, we'll call it, and there is where they're driving into the vein. Basically, there's no stopes as far as I could see involved. This is just driving into the vein and carrying back the gold-bearing ore. Back to surface now, and here is a bit of a workshop, as you can see. This is very much an African operation with where you can do all sorts of things in the sun, and they do call this mine Clean Mining Mozambique. Right, so they've got some kit here with their electrical power. They've got a little crusher here, quite an effective device. The guy who's like permanently watching it has got a mask, the others don't. I think there could be a silica issue here. There's dust, you can even see dust in the air, I think. And but nevertheless, it's a lot more efficient than the little hand-turned mills, or should I say the pestle and mortar system for crushing that we saw back at Tsetserra. But talking of the mills, so they've got a much bigger mill here, and the bell maiden is feeding it. It's being dampened in the mill, the ore, and that's turning. It's I guess a ball mill, and crushing down the ore to a fine size. Side view here, you can see the mill and the electric motor driving the train, and the eventually ground down comminuted rock ore will come down into this system down at the bottom here, which is a centrifugal separation process primarily. So it feeds into this drum, and you can see there's also they're catching it in a bucket underneath once they've done this centrifugal part, because they're not confident they've got it all out. And there we can see, after the spinning, the centrifugal process, that there has been a separation of the heavier material, which is contains some of gold. And then to take the plug out, and we can capture some of the remains, shovel it down into the bucket, and then do a bit more sorting, a little bit like our guys with the cloth. They may be using a chemical as well here, looking at the foam, not sure, but they're basically panning out as best they can the remaining gold. However, I suspect that quite a lot is not separated, and that was the point being made in the papers earlier, the academic papers, that it's not sufficient. It's not as efficient, frankly, as mercury. If you were mixing mercury in there, you would get most of your gold out. So the tailings, the remaining material, goes down into tailings ponds and settles there. There it is, the current one, moist. There's the previous tailings pond, and as you can see, that's all dried through now, and I do believe that if somebody would like to come up with a lorry from South Africa and take a couple of lorry loads away to a cyanide plant somewhere, there would be gold to be had here. And just to show you that the guy popped off on his lunch break to keep an eye on his few cattle there. This is classic of a mining area. Like Cornwall in the old days, people were miners and also farmers, and that's rather an attractive combination of life, really. Let's have a look at a slightly bigger again operation, so I'll call it medium scale. The Monyeni mine was still on that Greenstone Belt in Mozambique. Now this is a river where the story is that in 1999 this lady was panning and found gold in the river, and this attracted a gold rush. So there were about 3,000 people here, crawling all over this area, and as you can see, digging into the hillside and finding gold. However, this was, as I say, Mozambique was getting more and more orderly with its mine permits and its approach to the legal framework for these sorts of mines. And so an association was formed by some of the locals, and there are 157 of them now. They pay 50 metakai a month to be members, and they were attracting investment because there's definitely gold in these hills. And this South African investor has now put in money, owns 75% of the operation, but that has enabled the association to do even better, because they are getting a good grade out, and they've got some good kit for separating and processing. This is the result of that South African investment, and you can see this is looking a lot more sophisticated than the last one. A big mill at the end there, quite a decent sized ball mill there, and then some other processing kit. It's a kind of a test rig come up from some mining operation in South Africa. There's a closer picture of the mill, which takes 12 tons an hour, and you can see various cyclones and other gizmos for separating the output from there once everything's been ground down very fine, and they can separate out their gold pretty effectively. So now you're getting to a better level of operation, and this is really something that I suppose is beginning to approach what Vega is suggesting, that more professional involvement will be better for all round. However, it has to be said that, of course, as soon as you start doing a more orderly approach, you will employ less people, and that was clear there. Another one, move from gold at last onto something else. Gemstones are another big area of small-scale mining. The Nampasa mine in Mozambique. This is Tourmaline, an interesting gemstone. Comes in various colours, and it's quite desirable now. Now, this is a site that had about 1,000 people crawling all over it. And when I asked about them and what had happened to them now, I was told rather disdainfully, really, that these were generally Malians, Senegalese, and that they'd been cleared off now, which actually I found very interesting, because that's a very long way. This is the other side of Africa from Mali and Senegal, French-speaking Africa. So over into Portuguese-speaking Mozambique. So it's remarkable how these people move if they are, well, I suppose, driven by desperation, and they hear that there is something to be found. So again, we have the story of down from 1,000 people to 50 people employed now, and again an individual came in and profited from the fact that mining rights are becoming more orderly. So the area is secured now. The government is happy because taxes and so forth are being paid. Some of the old workings that were going on, they're all over the place. And this is the new secured site. As you can see, a much more orderly semi-industrial process going on now. And these are the kind of benches that they're working on now. They're hacking away at them. And an example of the tourmaline, in this case green, set into the rock. And this is what they're bringing out. And here is more of it. This was in a sack. It's been collected, and this particular sackful was thrown out on a table to show us. And this is the sort of tourmaline that any one of those pieces could probably be shaped and cut into a number of small jewels that can then be made into items of jewellery which are sold for up to, well, thousands, £2,000. I've seen it on the internet or in London jewellers. It's very desirable. It comes in these different colours. You can see pink seems to be fairly predominant, which might be partly an effect of the camera, but there's black tourmaline, there's green tourmaline. One of the people I was with was, in fact, a lady gemstone miner from, I think, Kenya, but she was an expert in sorting and profiting from gemstones, and she felt that these people were not doing the best they could, that they were just selling sacks to agents, middlemen, who were then taking more of a profit than was probably justified, that they could sort them fairly straightforwardly and do more with them on site, but that's her expertise. So thinking about this gemstone mining then, we'll leave Mozambique. Everybody's probably heard of blood diamonds and so forth. They've gone into various films. I believe James Bond even became involved at one stage. But that's probably less of a problem since the Kimberley process and various other initiatives to try to regulate the trade in gemstones. There may well still be an issue to some extent, but in general, things like the tourmaline and other forms of gemstone is a fairly sustainable business, and you can stimulate, alongside, of course, the gold, you can stimulate ethical jewellery, and people will be able to sell it in America, places like New York, London, from jewellers that will actually be able to put a premium on, because it's ethically sourced jewellery with certificates to say what the chain of development has been. And some of the countries are trying to bring some of that value back, but I think Mozambique is one, by training people in actual jewellery making and knowledge of jewels, so that the value stays in the country, and this is all to the good. Some last thoughts about Mozambique then, and this was in 2009, this paper by Mondlane, who's a geologist who is Mozambican, and at that time all of the gold and gemstones were from artisanal and small-scale mining, but since then, as I say, I think there is a large-scale gold mine coming. All those 100,000 people directly involved in Mozambique, giving subsistence to many, many more, as always. It's really the only alternative to agriculture when you're away from the coast. They're very keen to keep people in the countryside, and if you go to Maputo, which has a modest tourist trade, not very much really, but you will see beggars along the streets sides, and too many people selling cheap t-shirts and different things to try to scratch a living in the cities, and they really don't want any more in the cities. So if these activities keep people in the city, out of the cities, then it's all to the good for the general country. Makes a significant contribution, and of course people are now paying effective taxes a lot more due to these mining passes and the system they have. Looking at the Manica Province, where those sites were that I visited, and this is an inland province. A lot of Mozambique is on the coast, so fishing would be more of an issue on the coast, but the fishing such as it is there would be lakes and rivers in Manica. But as you can see, it's basically mining and agriculture, and mining is nearly half of the source of income. So we can't just shut it down like they did in Ghana. I'd like to move on now. I did mention at the start I'd have a quick look at critical metals. Now, a number of things have become more and more desirable due to modern technologies. Tantalum is one of them, a very inert metal used in laboratories and industrial processes, quite desirable for the defence industries, which of course means that there will be a great deal of focus on it. Substitute for platinum, and it is involved in the making of capacitors and resistors in all the gubbins that we want to have these days: computers, phones, DVD players, video games. It's also a useful additive in alloys to other metals for strength and ductility, corrosion resistance, and there's some dental uses as well in the growing modern world of developed countries. It is, however, one of the 3T conflict minerals, tin, tantalum and tungsten, that have become a little notorious because of the connection with, indeed, conflict, civil wars. The Kibara Belt runs through the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the DRC, and Rwanda, and is a major source of tantalum. The various ores, tantalite is the source of tantalum, columbite is another ore, source of niobium, another critical metal, and the one that is possibly best known is coltan, which is really just where the two occur together, coltan. It has a kind of ring to it that sticks in people's minds. These are found in kaolinized pegmatite, soft weathered rocks, a little bit like the China clay industry of Cornwall, easily dug out, but the deposits have not yet been considered sufficient for large-scale open-pit mining or anything to take place, so the small-scale miners still have it to themselves. A quick mention of the Dodd-Frank Act, which came into being in the US in 2010 after the 2008 crash, and there's a lot of requirements on US stock exchange investment, that there should not be any minerals related to conflict, particularly in the DRC or its neighbours, because these things tend to spill over. And of course, I have to say that Rwanda was a source of violent conflict not that long ago between the tribes there. So that was passed, and I believe that similar legislation came through the EU soon after. So the marketplaces for these modern technologies need to be assured that there are no minerals that are related to conflict, and that has had an impact in these areas. So a quick look at the Komikagi mines of Rwanda, the Cooperative Minière de Kababaru Gigingo. It's a cooperative of 72 different accesses, shafts and adits, working, in this case, tin and tantalum in different parts of Rwanda. Cassiterite and tantalite occur together, and they adhere to all the necessary traceability and due diligence schemes for the Dodd-Frank legislation and similar. And here's a couple of pictures from somebody I know called Dylan McFarland, who works in the field, and that's one of the Komikagi mine sites. You can see underground there, just knocking it out by hand basically. This kaolinized rock, heavily weathered, and generally underground in this area, brought up and then separated by mineral density. So there must be a crushing operation behind there, and then it's run down in water, and the different densities will separate at different places, so that we eventually end up with a concentrate like this, which is ready for sale for further processing elsewhere. So tantalite, from which tantalum can be separated in a more industrial environment. So that was Komikagi. A very quick word about rare earths, or indeed the heavy rare earths. Now, the heavy rare earths are a particular group of the range of rare earths. Light rare earths are the more commonly used and known ones for things like super effective magnets. But these heavy rare earths are at the heavier end of the line on the periodic table of rare earths, and things like LEDs, optical fibers, flat panels, all the things of the modern world suck in rare earths, and 80% of the world's resources are in small deposits in southern China and mainly mined by artisanal miners. These are low grades. Again, we have kaolinite. It's a heavily weathered material that has actually been moved by natural processes and settled in clays, rivers and so forth in time immemorial. And these miners can easily dig it out, but unfortunately the process they use for separating it with ammonium sulfate in ponds does leave rather an environmentally devastated site. And there are some pictures. I haven't got any that I have got copyright on to show you, but the ammonium sulfate is not doing the environment much good at all, and it's another one of these devastated looking places. So extensive water and soil pollution. There are concrete leaching ponds and also plastic lined ones. This was a paper from Yale Environment, and a lot of these have been shut down. Now there's some interesting impacts according to Standout and Zong, who know the area, and they will say that there's a lot more pollution coming from state-owned processing companies in China. And also the local Chinese will tell you that it actually is this kind of Western companies and so forth that are consuming the products that really ought to be paying for the cleanup of their area. And who could argue with that? So just to review then some of the less savoury things, all these critical metals such as tantalum, cobalt, tend to be related with conflict finance, or have been. The heavy rare earths tend to be related with pollution, with all the other areas of safety and health that are going on. But we have to ask this question: why are they there? Why are they able to make a living out of these? Who are these products, end products, for? Us. I'd like to quickly mention children in ASM, which I referred to briefly at the start, because there is some disagreement as to whether this should be a source of the throwing up of hands by Western agencies, as much as it may be. Is it keeping them away from schooling, or is by providing basic sustenance in places like Manica in Mozambique, keeping families together and enabling schooling? Well, one experience I had when we were travelling through around about dusk in the countryside of Mozambique, we crossed the river and suddenly there was an almost medieval scene ahead of us of children in loincloths, muddy, with little pans in the river, trying to find gold. So this seemed a little bit curious and possibly dodgy, so we stopped, and one of the people with us spoke Portuguese, had a word with them, and it turned out that actually they'd been to school, and this gold panning was just an operation such as we might go playing football after school in the local rec. They go down and hope to make a bit of money for their family with their gold pans. So should we be so worried about that? Another thing that I recall was a presentation by a government minister from Liberia, and this was soon after the end of a bitter civil war, yet another one of these in Liberia, and he had pictures of children working on gold panning and other mining operations, and he said, well, these are orphans, they have no family, they're left from the war, the country is flat on its back economically, how can we stop them? These are all, I think, serious points. But having said that, of course, there are undoubtedly dangerous workplaces where children should not be used as they are, which is going into unstable areas, often due to the fact that they can slither through gaps, they can climb nimbly down faces, and this should not be. But many of the tasks really are not that different from agriculture, which would be their other activity, digging and carrying. So that the thought is, by those that are promoting these thoughts, that some of these Western organisations, such as the ILO, may be taking a rather Western view of what childhood should be like. I leave you just to ponder that. Another thing, of course, before I end, to think about is COVID. Well, as a disease, I'm not sure that COVID-19 has as high a profile amongst artisanal miners in the outbacks of Africa and such places as it certainly does amongst other people in developed countries, because they have plenty of diseases already. TB is still rife in many places. There are many diseases like malaria and other more dramatic diseases. Cholera even exists, I think, in certain areas. So we've got people who probably aren't thinking so much about the disease, but unfortunately their markets have really been impacted, and the borders have often been shut. The industry has reduced dramatically around the world, as we know, and unemployment has risen, and as a result the places that their products ultimately end up in have reduced. The supply lines have been disrupted, so much so, and this was a Reuters reporter from Johannesburg, incidentally. It's not an academic thing, but I think it's got the nail on the head. The World Bank, which is an organisation that involves itself quite a bit with this sector, has created an emergency relief fund, and other agencies of relief are also mobilised with the miners in mind. And some of those agencies are mentioned here. So just to say that these people are not working completely in isolation. There's a lot of things go on. How much they reach, what proportion of miners, it might be questionable. But as I've said, the World Bank, at one time DFID, the Department for International Development in the UK, up until about 10 years ago, was also putting a lot of resource into this sector. It stopped dramatically with a change, I think, of policy in government. There was a chap, a Cornishman called John Hobbs, who was a great mover and shaker there, who then left. But I have recently noticed a DFID paper again, reviewing ASM mining sector. So maybe they're taking an interest again. There are organisations looking at the finance and the kind of value chain and how to work with all of that. There's one called PACT. There are various organisations such as the Artisanal Gold Council, Kevin Telmer in Canada, or moving around but based in Canada. Canada's always got a lot to do with this because they do actually have gold panners themselves in Canada, so they know what it's about and they take an interest. There are things like the African Minerals and Geosciences Centre. There's one called Levin, there's one called Pure Earth, and there are numerous others that are kind of funneling in Western knowledge and, well, not just Western, African knowledge of geologists and mineral processors that have been trained in Africa with the African Minerals Centre. There are a number of miner-generated ethical groups and also Western generated. The Alliance for Responsible Mining is the biggest one, ARM, which started in South America, but now it crops up working in Africa and other places as well. There are ethically sourced jewellery groups, which I referred to before. There is a database being developed called Delve, which on the idea of if you can measure something, you're better able to manage it. I don't know how much they're able to manage these people, but and there are various local initiatives, lots and lots of local initiatives of training and awareness, such as that one as quoted in Uganda. So I would like to finish now, and I give you this man. Now, I met him at Setsera village. He's actually a Zimbabwean. Now, he speaks excellent English. He's had a very good education, as is usually the case with Zimbabweans, despite the experiences their country have been through. And he found me because he found out that I was English, and we had a long conversation. He had left his family to seek work and income with the Zimbabwean economy being the state it was. He'd crossed the border. He has all the issues of the immigrant amongst the Portuguese-speaking Mozambican miners who are jealous of their own resources. He has his little house in Setsera village where he works from, and he was a man of immense dignity, and I felt huge respect. And for half an hour or so, I felt as if our worlds we were communicating, we were talking, telling each other about our families and about our lives, and it was quite a moving moment. So on behalf of him, the face of all the millions of artisanal and small-scale miners, thank you for listening.